This is a Rolex Milsub. Now, these were supplied to the British military in the latter part of the 20th century, and they are super rare. Now, consequently, and especially because they're associated with the military, these are just phenomenally attractive to collectors. In fact, this one is worth so much that I could only have it in my workshop for a day because my insurance wouldn't allow me to hang on to it for any longer. Now, the watch is owned by a guy called Ian. And here's the man himself. How are you getting on?
Bad.
Ian is an ex-Royal Marine and he got the watch while serving with the regiment. Now, recently Ian contacted me and asked me, as one veteran to another, if I would help him sell the watch. So I called around and managed to find a guy who has actually seen one before and who has, importantly, actually sold one before for a lot of money. And here is our watch expert, Nick.
Hello, Richard, nice to meet you.
£4,260, so then plus the client should not have £2. 443 is a Regency mahogany full chair. There it is, shown for you there. And interest in this starts me here. I have to bid at 100.
Okay, so how did you come to obtain this?
I was in the range from 75 to 91 and I acquired the watch just after I came out of the Royal Marines through a friend of mine who it was issued to. It was Special Forces and it went missing, I think, on a dive, and you got the smacked hand for it, and I've had the watch ever since. Basically that's everything I know about the watch. It's had a service done in 91.
So these were made between 1971 and 1979. Obviously a special order by the Ministry of Defence. They estimate that about 1,200 of these were made. And obviously being military watches, they're a tool watch designed to be used. Over those time, many of them have gone missing or no longer in use, and they reckon that there's about 200 of these left, so these do make them quite the rare watch.
But here's the problem. This watch is worth a phenomenal amount of money, and I've got to get the back off, and it's not been serviced in decades and decades, so the back is really stiff. Now, this is the back, this is the case, and under here there's a genuine nice piece of quite fragile 1970s original acrylic glass. So I've got to get enough pressure on the back here to actually rotate the case back without breaking the glass on the really phenomenally valuable watch. Okay, here goes. Oh, yes. Yes. Nice. God for that. So the reason I'm taking the back off this watch is because I want to send to Nick Mann in Dreweatts some really detailed footage of the movement before he sees the watch itself, just to help him authenticate it.
Such as my best man was ex-Special Forces in the Royal Marines, SBS, and it was given to me as a wedding present. He was my best man at my wedding, and that's how I acquired the watch in 91 prior to me getting married.
So I figure that the wedding started at 2 o'clock, because if we focus in now on Ian's watch that he's been given on the day, you can see that he's signing the register at about 31.5 minutes past 2. So, the service and 4 hymns and you're there. But it's interesting because the watch is on a bracelet, because his best man is not going to give it to him on that day to wear with a suit on a NATO strap, even with a grey suit.
So we've got 0552, which would indicate the Royal Navy, followed by 923-7697, which is the NATO code. And below that we've got the broad arrow mark for the War Department. And then just below that is the issue number -75, 75 being the year it was issued, which is great because looking at the serial number on this watch, it was produced in 1975, so it would have been issued in the same year as production. Serial, the reference number, sorry, we've got the 5513. There were 3 different reference numbers. There was the 5513, as we have here, the 5513/5517, which was then found to be on the bottom lug, which we haven't on this one. So this makes it a 5513, and then the last reference was the 5517, the serial number, which I have checked already, and that was produced in 1975. So it's great that it was produced and issued in the same year. It helps to say it's genuine because it was produced in 1975 and issued in 1975.
Yeah.
So it's not like we've got a serial number that was produced in 1997 and it was issued in 1975. So that's a great start. So I believe that this being a service dial, because I have not been able to find any other dials with the superlative chronometer, so it's unfortunately not the original dial. When you had it serviced, where was it serviced?
It was done through a jewellers in the northwest that doesn't exist anymore, but I've got a feeling it went to Rolex at Bexley in Kent. But he mentioned that face was already on, and he thinks with it being a work watch, if it had come into the stores and it had to go back on operation duties, that's when that face would have been changed.
Yeah, that would make sense. And looking at the hands as well.
I think one of the hands as well, isn't it?
So the 5513 actually was issued with either the sword hands, which are the sort of larger hands, but there are examples that were issued with the Mercedes hands. So it's quite possible that those are the original hands. It depends when it was serviced. If they were changing the dial, they may well have changed the hands at the same time. And then obviously you have the spring bars put in so you could wear the bracelet.
I have an oyster bracelet as well.
Obviously,
but I was told that could be rectified back as it wanted to by a jeweller.
Sure. So these military submariners are very collectible. Obviously, if there's only roughly 200 left, then it makes them quite hard to get hold of.
Yeah.
So at auction, we have sold one of the military submariners in the past, back in 2017.
So often when a watchmaker does a service on a watch, he will mark the inside of the case back with some particular markings, normally the date, and sometimes a number that reflects the job in the register of whatever workshop is doing the works. We have definitely got the service to the watch in 91, but we've also got another service some 3 years earlier than that, before Ian got the watch. And looking at the way the letters and numbers are formed, then I think that these services have been done by the same person.
Well, the only way I can say that that's happened is when I had it serviced in 91. Prior to that, Sutty owned the watch, and he lives in the same area as me. So I'm not sure if this is how it's happened, but he possibly, I know he used the same jewellers as a family jeweller as I used to. So he could have possibly have taken it to them for a service prior to me acquiring the watch, and that's how the two details and figures come up the same.
And as we can see from the front there, that the movement's functioning quite nicely. This houses the 1.5 series of movements, introduced by Rolex in 1957, and it was used for 20 years up until 1977. It's considered a real workhorse of a movement, which is exactly what you'd want in a tool watch. You'd want it to be able to take a bit of a knock and keep on going. So this example houses the 1520, which was the predecessor to the 1530. It's considered one of Rolex's best movements.
Okay, this is exactly what I wanted to see, because this is a Rolex 1520 and it is exactly the right movement for the period. In fact, I've got a Rolex Air King, which is about as humble as a Rolex as you can get, on the bench just next to this watch, and a little bit later I'll compare the two movements. So, you know, we can say that it has a genuine Rolex movement of the right period inside it. Whether or not this is the movement that was in the watch in the first place is another matter, but given the rest of the history behind this watch, I see no reason for it not to have been. And certainly the case was like really difficult to get off, so I don't think it's been opened up since it was last serviced in 1991. So this is exactly what I wanted to find. We're just going to now point out a few of the bits in here for people that are not familiar with these Rolex movements. But first, let's look at this, because this is my watch from my own brand Major, which was my rank when I left the British Army, and isn't it pretty? Anyway, check out the link in the description. So getting in a little bit closer here, you can see the balance wheel turning nicely. It is actually running a little low on amplitude, but that's probably because the watch is getting towards the end, I think, of its wind. So I'm just going to put up a little bit of power on the watch here. Have to say that that is actually silky smooth. That is really nice action through the keyless works there onto the mainspring. That felt really nice and positive. And I don't know whether you noticed as well how nicely the rotor arm moved around. So this is called the rotor arm here, and this is the thing that automatically winds the watch as you wear it. So this sort of spins round, and these two purple wheels here are called the reversing wheels, and they are an elegant piece of engineering, because regardless of the direction that the rotor turns in, this wheel here, the center one, let me just point to that here, this one here, that actually will always turn in the same direction, because it's that one that is winding the mainspring, which is inside the barrel, which is this component here. So the mainspring sits inside this barrel. This component here is called the ratchet wheel. This is the click here. This top part is the automatic works, and the two reversing wheels and the wheel that drives the mainspring tight, so to store the potential energy required for the watch, and that energy is worked through the powertrain to the escapement here. In a minute we'll have a look through the microscope at the pallet fork. You can just see it working through the balance wheel there. You can see a couple of jewels on the pallet fork, and we'll look at those closer in a moment. But guys, this is really pretty. It's a really lovely Rolex movement of the right period for this watch, and as I say, I will show it you next to a Rolex Air King of the same period in a moment. Let's just pop this under the microscope and have a look at the escapement. when we're considering the performance of this watch, we do have to bear in mind that it has not been serviced since 1991. And it's not bad at all, this. In fact, plus 18 seconds a day, the amplitude is above 220, the beat error is not that bad. So, really, for a watch of this age, and even in the other positions, it's really looking pretty good. If you look on this footage to the upper right of my right hand, you'll see that on the bench I have a Rolex of the same era. Now this is actually a Rolex Air King, which also has a 1500 movement in it. Now I thought it'd be a good idea then to just compare the two. They came out of Rolex in the mid-70s, so they should look pretty identical. Now I've seen a lot of these, so I already knew what I was looking at, but if you look at the two together here, you can see just how identical they are. And getting up close to the cases as well, you can see that just the standard of the machining of the case and the way that the reference numbers are put on, these have come out of the same place at roughly the same time. I think there's no doubt about that. So I meant the reading of the thumbnail for this video to read something like, how much is it worth? Rather than, how much is it worth? But we still haven't asked that question. How much is it worth? I guess if Ian decides to take it to auction at Dreweatts, then it's worth what anyone is prepared to pay on the day. So hey, mention it in the comments. Be really interested to know what you guys think this watch is worth. And also, if you're interested in the watch and you want to know any more about it, then I'm collating some more information, detailed photos and that sort of thing on my website. So check out the link in the description for that.